Canelo Alvarez is one of boxing's most accomplished athletes. He has multiple championships in 4 weight classes, and he started his career at age 15. He achieved unprecedented success, including becoming the first undisputed super middleweight champion. Canelo is known for his exceptional counterpunching and pressure. Usually counterpunchers are slick boxers working on the outside, but Canelo is true to the Mexican style of boxing, of pushing forward and luring opponents to attack him in order to counter. He primarily uses his head movement to avoid punches while in range of his opponents, and frequently attacks the body to set up heavy attacks to the head in the later rounds. His style has evolved towards professional boxing rather than amateur boxing. In general, professional boxing is about doing damage, while amateur boxing is about landing clean punches to get points. As such, the meta or your style of boxing will change to accommodate whether it's professional or amateur boxing. Again, professional boxing has 12 rounds, whereas amateurs have 3. Amateurs can't let their foot off the gas, and they need to stay active with their punches, even if it means taking some. For professional boxers, it's important to start slow and be generally cautious of taking unnecessary damage. Canelo's style heavily reflects the professional style of boxing. It relies heavily on managing distances and being patient with his punches. Some say that he's flat-footed, but his footwork is largely underrated in that he's able to circle and position his opponents in the ring while staying balanced and measuring the distance in order to land his counters. During his time in the lower weight divisions, especially around middleweight, he was a much more aggressive combination puncher. He has an exceptional chin, and he would often push forward aggressively and overwhelm his opponents with combinations to the body and head. Something changed with Canelo's style after his first loss against Mayweather. Boxers often call this the touch, when a fighter loses to a better fighter and suddenly increases in skill afterwards, as if it were touching greatness and it made them great themselves. After his loss, he started refining his defense and IQ to box on his back foot and not constantly move forward aggressively. He also started moving up in weight, so he started loading up on his punches for maximum power instead of throwing flashy combinations. He stands 5'7.5", and he really needed to earn the respect of the giants he was facing at these higher weight classes. Here are some techniques and tricks that Canelo frequently uses. Others, of course, use them as well, but Canelo has mastered them and excels at them and has incorporated it into his particular unique style of boxing. Feints are crucial to his new style and to replace the function of his old combination punching approach. Since he's now looking for single explosive punches, these kinds of punches are obvious if they're not set up correctly, and they expend a lot of energy. Therefore, feints are necessary to open the opponent up to land the explosive punch. Feints are also more effective given the power of his punches, and opponents will react more to stronger punches. It's a form of pressuring your opponent without having to actually punch them. Observe here in this clip, he feints the left hook to set up the jab. Here he throws the right uppercut to set up the left hook to the body. Here he taps the left hand upstairs to set up the left hook to the body. Here he feints a left hook to the body to set up the left hook upstairs. Here's a particularly creative one. He feints the right hand to set up the left uppercut. The right overhand feint to the left uppercut is definitely one of my favorite moves. It's a thing of beauty. Here he feints the left hand and throws a right uppercut to set up the jab. And here he throws a 1-2 or just a straight right to set up the jab. Head movement. Canelo is the purest pro boxer because of his head movement. It avoids all damage. You don't see this as much in the amateurs because amateur boxers aren't as cautious about taking damage and would rather throw more straight punches. Canelo uses head movement to set up his counterpunching. He dodges the opponent and hits back. It's also frustrating and demoralizing to his opponent when they can't land a shot, which mirrors what Floyd Mayweather did. However, Canelo's head movement is more upright and suited for aggression, similar to Mike Tyson. It's important to note that head movement is pretty ineffective without footwork. Like Mike Tyson, Canelo is also a master of using his head movement while simultaneously shifting and repositioning his feet to be in a position to punch back and be weighted. He's also mastered a technique of rubbernecking or rolling with the punches. This is when you know that you're going to get hit, so you sort of move in the same direction as the punch in order to take some force off the punch. This move is very common in the Mexican fighting tradition, but Canelo has mastered it. In general, his head movement is a testament to his athleticism. He's born with the reflexes to utilize his head movement. He can see the punches. Explosiveness. Canelo has explosive punches. They're not heavy-handed and thudding like Triple G or Beterbiev. They're more like Pacquiao or Mike Tyson. It's the difference between a sledgehammer and a whip. Canelo's punching power are a product of speed, athleticism, and fast twitch muscles. He uses this explosive punching to get knockouts. A knockout physiologically is caused by the brain bouncing back and forth in the skull. While a heavy-handed punch might cause more damage per punch, an explosive punch and the speed are more ideal for causing the physiological effects of a knockout. Explosive punches are also easier to land due to their speed. As such, it can be an effective way of accumulating damage on the opponent. Canelo makes use of this by sneaking in body shots and, more recently, punching the arms. Explosiveness also makes his combinations more effective by varying the strength of the punches and ensuring that not all punches are going to be at full force and keeping the opponents guessing. Modern and mature Canelo is a different fighter. He's much more intelligent about using his tools. He's very heavy for his size, like a little tank, and he knows he has explosive punching power, but his weight is generally affecting his cardio into the later rounds of the fight. He's therefore much more picky with his punches. He sets up body punches to tire out his opponents and make them more stationary targets. He's often fighting much taller opponents and punching their shoulders and arms to lower their guard and expose their head. His pressure and aggression is more nuanced with the use of feints and traps. He no longer relies on chasing his opponents and trying to suppress them with a flurry of combinations. He's much more methodical and composed about getting the final knockout punch to the head. He combines this offense with an incredible defense. His defense is likely what's improved the most. Because he's more patient with his punches, he relies on using his head movements to get into range of his opponents and finding a chance to counter them. While he's often coming in with his high guard, he often lowers his guard to set up a trap for his opponents to hit him and then counters that. He trusts his reflexes, but he also trusts his chin. This is partly due to the built-up size of his neck, but is, again, the ability to roll with the punches or rubberneck. Even with his head movement, his guard is much more dynamic now, and not just a rigid high guard like his younger self. Canelo is overall a smarter fighter now. He can adapt effectively to different opponents, and he's mastered using the tools that he was gifted with. Weaknesses. Canelo has patched up many of his weaknesses later into his career, especially his erratic and patient combination throwing as well as his defense and cardio. However, his second official loss to Dmitry Bivol revealed that he's too small to be the best of the best in the light heavyweight division. Even as a super middleweight, he was much smaller than a lot of his opponents, and he made up for that through his own abilities. But someone equally skilled will ultimately beat him, as demonstrated by Bivol. Canelo's style interestingly lacks a jab, and he prefers throwing lead hooks and uppercuts. This can be problematic against opponents with solid chins and defensive skill. He can be too reliant on getting into range with his head movement instead of his jab, and this can cause him to lose on points. Canelo also starts his fights fairly slow in order to analyze his opponent and has a history of gassing out in the later round. While judges have been kind to him, he lets a lot of the rounds go in order to chase the knockout. While he's great at adapting to different fighters, his style and toolkit is fairly straightforward. He does a few things better than anybody else in the world, which can describe a lot of history's greatest fighters, but in head-to-head against other Hall of Famers, Canelo struggles against the best technical fighters. In my opinion, he lost the first fight against Gennady Golovkin or Triple G, which was officially ruled a draw. Here we saw Triple G, known for his knockout power, actually outbox Canelo. Triple G actually has a deep amateur pedigree, worked under the Soviet-style boxing system, and he really knows how to win rounds with his jab. Final assessment. I'm going to assess Canelo based on 5 criteria: durability, intelligence, athleticism, offense, and defense. There's a lot of other criteria to look at when looking at a fighter, but I boil it down to 5. When it comes to durability, we're of course going to look at the chin, whether they've been KO'd or knocked down frequently. Canelo had some knockdowns early in his career, but in his later career, he hasn't been knocked down at all or KO'd. There's also durability in terms of other damage to the rest of the body, but generally, punches don't really affect Canelo. There's also the physicality of being durable. Canelo is physically very strong and often much stronger than his opponents that are bigger than him. Overall, in terms of durability, I give Canelo an S. He's one of the most durable fighters I've ever seen. Intelligence. Intelligence here, I include the ability to adapt to their opponents and the ability to stick to a plan and execute it. Canelo is very good at this. He can adapt easily, and he has interesting tactics like hitting the arm repeatedly to ensure that the opponent lowers their guard. Another part of intelligence is the creative techniques. Canelo is fairly creative with his combination punching, but he's a rather one-dimensional fighter, say compared to Vasyl Lomachenko. The final part of intelligence I look at is experience and veteran tactics. Canelo has been boxing since he was 15 and he's seen it all. He knows how to adjust. He also knows the veteran tactics of bending the rules and working with the referees and judges. Overall, I would give him an A+. Next, athleticism. One part of athleticism is speed, hand speed, footwork, reaction in terms of dodging punches. Also finding the opportunity to land punches and counter punches. Canelo clearly excels in all of these aspects, except perhaps footwork, but even that is very elite. Another part of athleticism is stamina. Canelo has had a tendency of gassing out, but recently he's pacing himself more and his conditioning has improved greatly. Even with his added weight, he seems fine in the later rounds. Final part of athleticism is willpower and focus. Canelo has heart. He also has the instinct to know when to finish off an opponent or when an opponent is injured to capitalize on that. This is all familiar within the Mexican fighting tradition, which Canelo embodies. Overall, I'd give Canelo's athleticism an S. Offense. Here I include things like punching power and explosiveness, which Canelo again clearly excels at, the variety of punches and combos, as well as feints. Here, the one weakness is likely his jab, which he underutilizes. Finally, there's the timing of the offense and landing the punches and countering punches. These are all aspects which I think Canelo also exceeds at. While elite in these areas, I would give Canelo's offense an A+, not quite an S yet. I look at his ability to manage the distance, use his angles and footwork to avoid punches and put himself in a good position. Canelo is very good at this, however, other elite fighters are perhaps a bit better. Another aspect, of course, is head movement, and I think here he is probably the best ever. The final aspect is having an appropriate guard. Canelo often uses the high guard, but he's been a bit better in terms of changing and making his guard more dynamic. I think overall, defense is his weakest point, but because he exceeds so much in head movement, I would have to give him an A. Alvarez is one of the greatest Mexican boxers of all time, up there with Julio Cesar Chavez and Salvador Sanchez. He probably has a net worth of around $250 million, yet he still wants to fight. To me, that's what makes him a legend.